Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. Today on the program, the search for the next Chief Justice is on.
For me, Your Honor, as a Catholic, it's immoral for two people to engage in premarital sex.
I'm not here or not an honor. I hope you had to take those into consideration.
Whoever is appointed, I would like to request that he hears his constituents, the problems that they have.
As challenges remain in reforming the judiciary.
I was aware of all these problems that the courts were facing, and then that the people were looking forward to a fiercely independent court.
Also, with majority of Supreme Court members being appointed by the President.
Our history in the Supreme Court is really that we are no president's court.
Can the High Court maintain its independence?
Will be very fiercely independent. Kasi ayaw din namin yung bansag na rubber stamp lang kami ng executive. Ayaw din namin yung bansag na rubber stamp kami ng legislative.
Also from Justice to Love Guru. Slide into his Twitter inbox to get instant love life advice. Supreme Court Associate Justice Marvic Leonen joins us live. Thank you for joining us. I'm Pinky Webb. Change is coming to the Supreme Court as the President is set to choose the next Chief Justice after the controversy that hounded the High Court following the removal of then Chief Justice Lourdes Sereno. How is the Supreme Court recovering and healing? Also, with President Rodrigo Duterte appointing most of the members of the Supreme Court, how will the institution remain independent? And from the High Court to Twitterverse, meet the Lab Guru. Let's go straight to the source of the story. We have Supreme Court Associate Justice Marvic Leonen. Justice, it's so good to see you again. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, Pinky, and I owe you this interview for the longest time.
For such a long time. I waited patiently, and it's a very good time to have you, Justice. You were appointed Justice of the Supreme Court back in 2012. For those who may not know prior to that, it's a very colorful past because, well, one is we used to interview you as a legal analyst in various issues. So 2012, you were appointed Supreme Court Justice by then President Noynoy Aquino, and you were 49 years old.
Yes.
Are you the youngest Supreme Court Justice?
I was the youngest appointed post-war, but now there is a younger justice than me. It is Justice Paul Hernando, Mon Hernando. He's 52 years old.
Okay, while we're just going to show that first on air, we're going to fix the mic of Associate Justice Marvic Leonen, and we will speak to him. So as I was saying, he was appointed by President Noynoy Aquino in 2012 at 49 years old, and Justice is telling us that post-war, he was the youngest appointee. And then, let's continue with that, Justice.
The youngest is Ramon Paul Hernando, appointed by President Duterte. He is 52 years old, so he is 5 years younger than me.
I see.
Yes.
So 7 years into the Supreme Court, was it what you expected it to be? Is it?
Yes and no. There are things that you will only know when you're in there. But I think all our careers as lawyers prepare us for this job. And it's a quite interesting run so far. And I think there will be more to come.
What's the one thing that you didn't expect that actually is happening in the Supreme Court?
Right now, the collegiality among the justices. That despite the differences in many opinions, despite my continuous dissents in quite a few controversial cases, that the justices are very collegial to each other. We have lunch together. And when we're in Baguio, we give each other pasalubongs. And then we get to sit together and talk about many, many things.
Really?
You can imagine the range of conversation that we have.
Yeah.
And many of the justices have a good sense of humor. And I think that helps a lot in toning down the spirit many of our deliberations.
You mean you can completely dissent on various issues? If you look at some of the voting in the past, no, you would normally see 9-9-5.
9-5. But there are cases where it's actually 14-1 with me.
You're the only
the only dissenting opinion, or 13-2,
Right.
13-3, 12-3 is usual. Yes, 9-5 or 9-6 is also usual.
So because of that, the 4, the 3, you know,
Yes.
justices, they're not isolated by the 9 or the 10 or the 11?
No. As a matter of fact, there is no distinction when we come together and talk about things. You know, I think I have the most dissents against the current Chief Justice, Lucas Bersamin. And these are very important cases. Yet in his retirement ceremony this afternoon, he has chosen me to be his master of ceremonies. I will host the retirement ceremonies.
Why you?
I think that's, we have come to become good friends, and I think that's how the Chief Justice is. He's very collegial. And he will take the risk that he told me, just say anything you want to say. And I said, are you sure? And he said, yes. He thinks that it's important to send a message that despite our ideological differences or differences in judicial philosophy, that we can still act as an institution.
But I guess my question is, doesn't it get a little personal, sir, that you dissent and you feel strongly and passionately about it and still be friends with someone that you completely do not believe, disagree with?
Yes. Well, you will disagree with them on how they read the case, how they read the law, their approach in reading the law. But as human beings, I think you should be able to make that distinction, that you are there on a professional ability and you cannot give in to your personal friendships because the whole nation and the entire institution is at stake. But in terms of discussing things on a very personal level, it's the same thing. Problems of family. We go through traffic together, each of us from different starting points. Well, problems of love, very funny stories as we went through our journeys to the Supreme Court, and we laugh with each other and at each other.
Who is your closest friend in the Supreme Court?
Well, all of them.
Really?
Yes.
No one particular person closer to?
There are a few that I call on a daily basis or call me on a daily basis. You know, this Chief Justice, Bersamin, and the Chief Justice before him, Tess de Castro, we can walk into their office at any time. Like yesterday, as I was about to leave, I just passed by his office while he was speaking with, I think they were trying to settle how the JBC looks at the psychological profile of the candidates. And I walked in, there were psychiatrists and psychologists there, and I said, can I consult with your guests? Because I want to check my psychological profile. And we just had a laugh. So,
Really?
yes.
Ganun yun?
Yes.
Because being so, away from the Supreme Court, an institution that seems to have a lot of, privacy, secrets, I've always wondered what it's like. Would you say that it's a friendlier atmosphere now compared to...
It's a more collegial atmosphere. And I think we are more honest with each other in terms of our relationship. But when we sit together as magistrates, it's very serious.
Yeah.
And at times in the deliberation room, the Supreme Court sits in a room where there are no staff, only 15 of us when we deliberate. And it is there where the voices become stronger, and you will see different styles of how they would argue. And later on, it will all come down to a vote. And after the vote, of course, there are some personal feelings after the vote.
For sure,
yes.
sir. Tao lang kayo.
Yes. So after you lose a vote or you win a vote, when you win a vote, you try to be gracious. When you lose a vote, you do not make it known to the others that you have hard feelings about it. But then after that, we have lunch together.
Yeah.
And I think that helps in the healing of the process.
So is it almost just as saying, like, you win some and you lose some? Parang ganon.
Yes, although of course all of us want to win all.
Of course, we all
Yes.
want to win. We only want to lose a few times, but we
Yes.
want to win more. How would you describe the Supreme Court, aside from it being collegial now, a collegial body now?
Supreme Court is now, I think, very seriously wanting to address many of the issues and the perceptions of the public of how it is. So, number one, I think the Chief and I think the other senior justices, Peralta, for one, and Telly Bernabe, want to address efficiency of our courts. We have had, I've written a ponencia on speedy trial. This is Kagang. And I think many courts now are very aware that they have to hold continuous trials.
Good.
So we work with judicial affidavits. I mean, you know how laborious the process was in the past. We have just passed an amendments to the rules of evidence, and sooner or later the rules on civil procedure, just to be able to look at where the inefficiencies are. Also, I think the court is becoming conscious of the need to address allegations of corruption within its ranks. So the penalties now are higher. We have disbarred quite a number of lawyers, dismissed quite a number of judges and court personnel, and I hope the trend continues.
Well, the trend continues, hoping that the trend continues, how important is the next, the appointment of the next Chief Justice after Lucas Bersamin, sir?
Very important. The selection of a Chief Justice is always I think, a milestone in the history of any court. Courts are known by the names of the Chief Justice, so this is the Bersamin Court. The next Chief Justice, I think, has to take advantage of all the competencies of all the 14 other justices. He or she cannot afford to do it alone, and he or she needs to continue the focus on efficiencies, including making an honest-to-goodness effort to continue with our e-courts, looking at integrity of the judges and justices, checking the competence of judges, and of course our lawyers. And I think very important that the next Chief Justice needs to have the personality of being consultative with all the personnel.
You know, Chief Justice Lucas Bersamin, I asked him that same question. What's the one characteristic that the Chief Justice should have? And let's listen to what he said.
Less IQ, more EQ. Kasi the position of a Chief Justice is very critical. Kung hindi siya nakikipag-relate sa mga kapwa justices, wala. Makikipag-relate sa mga trial judges, wala. Makikipag-relate. So even if you are the most brilliant...
Agree?
Yeah.
How
I
about
agree.
you? What's the most important characteristic of a Chief Justice, sir?
The intellectual leadership shows not only in what he or she writes, the intellectual leadership shows in how he is able or he or she is able to bring ideas together, for he or her to step back a little from his or her own position, be humble a little, and allow the others to show where they are and then come out with a solution. So that requires a lot of listening. That requires a lot of the chief being able to go to places in the country. For example, even as far down south as Tawi-Tawi, for that matter, to listen to court personnel.
How important is seniority in choosing the next Chief Justice?
Before I entered the court, I didn't think much of seniority, but as I became a member of the court, it's important that the next Chief Justice has been a chair of a committee, a chair of a division, has had a lot of relations with his or her colleagues, as well as members of the lower court and personnel of the lower court. And I think that is where seniority comes in.
I see.
And seniority also comes in understanding how the Supreme Court works, its traditions, and why the traditions are there.
Are you favoring any one of the nominees?
Well, two of them are my seniors. This is Justice Dado Peralta, who I consider as an elder brother. The other one is a very close colleague. This is Estela or Telly Perlas Bernabe. They are both very competent. And I would not say favoring because I am not in a position to favor, but I know of their different competencies, the competency also of Andy Reyes and Joey Reyes. And I can imagine a court under Peralta. I can also imagine a court under Bernabe.
All right, we'll be taking a short break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Please stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Our guest today, Supreme Court Associate Justice Marvic Leonen. Why did you, bakit niyo tinanggihan yung nomination for Chief Justice?
Because there were two who were more qualified than me. And second, to be a Chief Justice, you need to be able to bring the court to a unanimous opinion on most cases. And the way I've read my colleagues in the past, given the controversial cases, I thought that it was better as my role to state the dissent, state the dissenting position. And in many cases, it was 14-1. For example, on religious freedoms, I would always be at the far end. And I thought that if somebody would become a Chief Justice, they will have to give up on those types of dissents in order that the court become unanimous.
And you can't do that.
Right now, I think it is more important that I take the role of actually expressing a different view from many of the issues.
Because this is what you said. I will be able to do what I do best for our people in my current position at this time. So my question is, could there be another time for you?
We don't know. We can only live at the present. And, you know, Pinky, I never expected to be here. You know, we were together in many guestings in the other network, and now we find ourselves where we are. We could not have imagined that.
Yeah, all of a sudden you were, you know, a very distant person from the person I had known in the past. We're looking at you, as you're saying, as a dissenter. Would you call yourself an opposition? Consider yourself an opposition?
Actually, I would say 80% of the time, the Supreme Court votes unanimously. 80% of the time, because these are doctrinal issues which we need to reiterate. Many times, as a dissenter, I would bring maybe the last dissent, we were 7 out of 15. The vote was 8-7 on an important case on obscenity coming from Manila. And it's coming out soon because all we need to do is sign it. The vote was 8-7. I was one of the 7. So it is not entirely accurate to say that I am at the farthest fringe. But there are a few cases where I have been quite strident. Again, religious freedom, psychological incapacity. Law students and lawyers know my position there, that we need to rethink the doctrine, that we still need psychologists and psychiatrists, etc., and many other cases.
Okay. Before we leave the issue on Chief Justice, what do you say to some people who actually describe possibly Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio as the Chief Justice we never had?
The best Chief Justice we never have, I agree with that more than 1,000%. I have worked with Associate Justice Carpio, and if I remember correctly, in my dissenting opinion, in the case of Republic versus Sereno, I did say that the court becomes more stable every time he acts as acting Chief Justice. Justice Tony Carpio is the justice's justice. So he is a mold where a few of us want to emulate. By the way, he was also my professor. But I have also dissented against him.
All right. There are current issues. I'm not sure if you're going to answer, but I need to ask you just the same. Very big, of course, is the vice presidential protest. I'm only asking this, sir, because Chief Justice Bersamin said yesterday this. By October, siguro possibly next week, October 15, that a decision on the VP protest will be out by next week. Do you concur, sir?
I cannot comment, of course, and I will just say that that is the word of the Chief Justice. But, you know, there are 15 of us. And when you have 15 minds thinking about a single issue, it tends not to be dichotomous, meaning to say a yes or a no, one for one party or the other. You can imagine that several ideas have been proposed already. Beyond that, I cannot comment on that case.
He said this, and I quote, "It may not be what you expect kasi we are still discussing on many things." The phrase, though, here that is a little maybe controversial would be, "Don't worry, di ko niluluto."
Because we hear social media, we hear people making, shall I say, unfounded accusations that there is already a vote, that it is for one side, that there is money exchanging hands. I think these are irresponsible comments. When you are present and see the discussion, it is, I think, a very honest discussion as to how to proceed with respect to a case which we know is very important because it involves no less than the second most important position in our country. Plus, of course, the precedents in relation to protests on a national scale. And then going through the history of the case, there are quite a few nuances. So it is not a black or white thing. And
Is it a little complicated?
yes, it's always complicated. When every controversial case becomes complicated because it is very thoroughly studied. There are many angles which probably you will only see once the resolution or the decision in the case comes out. And when it is studied by the luminaries out there, I think they will start to appreciate why it's taking it's taking a bit of time
because,
to discuss.
Sir, Justice, really, we were expecting possibly a resolution or decision October 1, and then October 8,
Yes.
and then now October 15, which is
Yes.
next week, sir.
Yes.
So you cannot confirm nor deny if a
Yes.
decision
The-
will be made on
The
October
deliberations are continuous, meaning to say every time the bank meets as a whole court, and that is in the agenda, there will be quite a bit of discussion. And I think we're getting there, that there is an emerging consensus on how to move with respect to this case.
15. Which makes me believe that you already obviously have a decision on this.
No, well, not yet. No, on a personal level, of course, all of us have our position, and we are open to suggestions from the others, and probably sooner rather than later, we can come to an agreement.
Here's a question, sir. How important is a decision that be made at the soonest possible time?
Depends on the controversy. But you know, the Supreme Court is not designed to attend to contingencies of the present. Supreme Court is designed in order to settle principles and how laws are read. And we cannot be too swayed by the fact that we need to make a decision now. We have to take a look at the longer-term consequences. Whatever we say is precedent. And there is another election upcoming in 2022. Who knows that it will not be the vice president that will be contested? It might be the president. I don't know.
And this definitely can serve as a precedent,
As the precedent.
to the future protests,
Yes.
whether for the presidency or the vice presidency. Just before we go on a break, do you get affected? Do you guys get affected by social media?
No, because I think once you get to sit in the positions where we are, you have to accept that there is a bit of criticism that will be told of you. And I think the better judges know that whatever they do, there is always one side that will not be for their decision.
We'll be taking another short break. We'll be right back. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Our guest today, Supreme Court Associate Justice Marvic Leonen. What do you think of the transportation problem/crisis? Is it a problem? Is it a crisis?
Of course, it's a problem. And I think that...
Is it a crisis?
I think it's also a crisis, seeing how a lot of people have to wake up at 3 in the morning to be able to get to their jobs at 8 in the morning, and then at night coming home almost midnight, and spending 25% or 50% of our time in traffic, or struggling to find a way to commute.
In fact, you tweeted that today. 25 to 50% of our waking lives spent in traffic or struggling to commute. Certainly not the choice of many. Quality of life and productivity is affected very much so.
Yes, and I think the real solution is that we look at the people. We can walk, we can bike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the solutions. Okay, I'm gonna need to transition to this. You are the lab guru. Paano ba nangyari? How did this
I
come
don't know.
about?
I don't know. The first was that Bea Alonso Julia thing, and then
Is he really worth it?
yes, and then people started sending me direct messages asking me advice, and one which caught my attention was, "Is there really love at first sight?" So I had to tweet.
Ano ba sagot mo doon,
It's just
Justice?
hormones and eat a lot of papaya. And probably I said, you know, there are lots of people like us who have gone through a lot of relationships, suffered a lot, and I thought maybe this way I can give advice to the younger generation. And well, a lot of humor is involved.
Right.
Yes, and tell them that not to listen to too many love songs, they will suffer more. Not to watch too many rom-com movies.
So let me ask you, is there such a thing as true love?
None.
None.
Yeah, because love is really something that's amorphous. And when you really look at it on a philosophical level, everybody has their own definition of what it is. So when you say true love, it means that it's something that's objective. Whereas in truth and in fact, depends on the partner that you see.
Wow.
Yes.
So is there such a thing as destiny?
Destiny, no.
He is my destiny, she is my
No.
destiny.
That's too much love songs and rom-com. I think every person that you meet is flawed. And when you say that that person is your destiny, you're rationalizing.
Why would I rationalize that?
Because you want that person. And then after you see that that person looks the other way at a certain other partner, then suddenly your destiny also changes.
Okay, is there such a thing as a soulmate?
If there's a soul. And that's a basic question there.
You know, one of the tweets you put out there is, ang relasyon ay tulad ng Supreme Court oral arguments. Marami at matindi ang interpellation questions. Madalas, hindi mo masagot dahil hindi mo pinaghandaan o pinag-aralang mabuti.
Yes.
Maaari ding may tinatago ka.
Yeah, very true.
So how does it feel? I mean, is this siguro a stress relief for you being the lab guru?
Yes. Also, it's now causing stress because I have a backlog. There's so many tweeting. Just yesterday, I received about 15
15.
queries.
Nakakulang pa yan. After
Yes.
this, baka ano.
Yes.
Justice, what's the most intelligent, siguro, tweet about love that you have received na nahirapan kang sagutin?
Well, one who asked me, I don't know if it's intelligent, but it gave me a lot of pause. Should I stay or should I go in a relationship where I don't even have him? So I had to think very hard about what's happening to this girl.
And what was your answer?
And my answer was, well, that's not the question. The question is, why are you insisting on somebody that does not even want to see you?
Who's not with you,
Yeah.
ha? I wish we had more time, but we're gonna have to go and say maraming salamat kay Supreme Court Associate
Yes.
Justice Marvic Leonen. Sir, good to see you again. I don't know
Thank you,
when
Pinky.
I'm gonna see you again,
Yes.
but I hope not years naman or 5 years ulit. Maraming salamat.
Glad to be
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you, Pinky.
Thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.